Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce to you Reverend Dr. Dancho Azagra, who I hope I can call now my friend, since we've had some time to spend together, and it has been great getting to know him. Father Dancho was born in Madrid, Spain, and he read engineering science at Exeter College at University of Oxford, and he has also worked as a structural designer for building projects in various parts of the world. He's taught technology and structural design at the Architectural Association in Leicester School of Architecture and Oxford Brookes University. He studied philosophy at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome, specializing in ethics and anthropology. He is a ordained Roman Catholic priest, and this was in 2014. And he's currently the chaplain of Grandpont House in Oxford, and teaches philosophy in the Stadium General of the Prelature of Opus Dei in Northwestern Europe. So it's lovely to see Father Dancho again, and so I will hand over the keys to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here and very grateful for the introduction. And as you said, we had a very good chat preparing this meeting, which in fact changed my ideas of what to say, because I thought after the discussion I had with Syed that it would be very interesting to expand this discussion to the audience rather than me giving you a very detailed analysis. However, if you want a detailed analysis, if you type in Google Akrasia, original sin, and my name, you can find a paper that I wrote on that. So if you wanted a very deep, detailed analysis, well, that is there for free as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share the screen, because in this way I think I can do the presentation quicker and more clearly. So I have a little presentation. So let's see if it works. Okay, can someone confirm that this works? Yes, fantastic. Okay, so just to tell you what I'm going to try to say concisely, hopefully, so we can have a long discussion. So first, a little introduction about the theme and about the relevance of the question of original sin and some problems with it. Then I'm going to focus on the psychological problem that I find in the account of original sin, and that has led me to try to resolve it using some ideas from Aristotle, which I will introduce to you. Then I'm going to take you, hopefully quite quickly, through the passage of Genesis 3:1-6, which is the passage of original sin, the account of original sin. And finally, I'm just going to put a slide on possible issues for our discussion. So let's start. Original sin. Now, this must be one of the most controversial topics of theology, I think, as a whole. And it's controversial because I think for our time it's a scandal. We live in an era where many people think they can make themselves, they can disconnect themselves from their roots, from their history. We're in a moment where there is a lot of migration. And the sense that I can make myself is prevalent. So to talk about a primeval sin is to talk about something which is really irrelevant. If history is already irrelevant for many people, something that is prehistoric, primeval, is even more. Also, the idea of the consequences of original sin, that there is a stain, there is a punishment, somehow inherited for something I have not done. And this probably goes against the ideas of justice that many people are seeking and trying to impose in the world. But at the same time, there is a great fascination about original sin. And a fascination because, you know, the main Abrahamic religions, they talk about original sin. So it's actually a point of contact between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. And not only among those religions, but also they connect to philosophers such as Plato, who spoke about a primeval fall. And so the connections here are very interesting. Also, we are in a world where, unfortunately, evil is present throughout. And just thinking about the words that we have at the moment, it's just sufficient example to see that. And by evil, I don't just mean natural evil, but deep moral evil in us, in big conflicts, but also in conflicts of the day-to-day. And there is another reason that this account fascinates people, which I think is a rediscovering of the value of the biblical narratives as providing a deep wisdom on human nature, on relationships, and on our origins. So people are revisiting those narratives and discovering great depth. Now, I'm just going to give you there a quote. You can read it, and this is by Blaise Pascal, famous. It's you can find it in one of his pensées, and well, I think it's an interesting one. Okay, now there is a problem with original sin, or at least as I see it, an immediate problem, an apparent problem with original sin. Now, let's go back to the very, very beginning of the Bible. And we hear that Adam and Eve are created in the image and likeness of God. There's something divine in Adam and Eve, and they are placed in paradise. Now, from the account in the Bible, we can see that paradise meant harmony. First, harmony with God. So there is a sense of friendship with God. Adam and Eve, they know God, they know how to behave in a way that is pleasant to God, and they don't hide from him. So we see a harmony between Adam and Eve and God. But not only with God, but also with creation. God has given a mission to Adam and Eve to till the earth and keep it. And humans interact with nature, and nature is open to that interaction. There is no toil in the work of humans at the very beginning. This is what the Bible tells us. And there is deeper harmony, or harmony at a different level. This is also harmony within Adam and Eve, in their relationships and in themselves. There is an inner integrity. Their desires are order. Reason, illumined by God, God's light, prevails over lower desires. And there is also a harmony between themselves, that they look at each other not as objects of pleasure, but as loving companions. They see their bodies as gifts for one another. The expression one flesh is mentioned in the Bible. And we see that there is no shame, which is very connected with the idea of not feeling that I am an object, but I am a person, and not looking at other people as objects, but as persons. Now, sorry, let me just say something else. In the middle of all of this, as you know very well, a commandment is given by God to Adam and Eve. And it's a commandment that opens paths and closes some. And it's a commandment that puts some rules to the relationship with God. And it's a commandment about not eating of one specific tree. And the reason given by God is you will die. And Adam and Eve take that in, take the work of God, who knows more, and follow that commandment, at least at the very beginning. So what is the problem that I see with the account of original sin, taking into account all the things that I have said? And the problem that I see is that we are presented with a vision of human beings in a state of integrity, harmony at all those levels that I've said, but especially integrity within themselves, that reason prevails over other desires, and they're illumined by God and the knowledge of God. They have that knowledge, and also there is a willingness to obey God, who has given them the paradise and set everything, and so is to be trusted. Oh, sorry. So, with all of this in mind, Is sin psychologically possible? Can Adam and Eve, in that state of virtue, integrity, knowledge, how can they possibly sin? And for me, this is a very fascinating question, at least a question that I've asked myself, because I've studied a fair amount of psychological anthropology, philosophical anthropology, ethics, and you do wonder, can such human beings possibly sin? So, in order to try to analyze this, I'm going to bring two ideas from Aristotle. So we're moving now into the third part of this talk. I'm happy to know that I'm moving swiftly, but now I have to go slightly slower, because if I go too quickly, I may lose you. So I want to introduce you to two ideas of Aristotle. One is the states of character, and the other one is a Greek word that I'll tell you later. Let me start with states of character. And I think this is going to be relatively easy to understand because we are familiar with some of them. For Aristotle, states of characters are one of the three things that we find in the psyche of human beings. The other two being passions, by this he means affections, emotions, and then faculties to know and to desire. So Aristotle says, look, there are three things in our psyche. There are states of character, there are passions, emotions, affections, and then there is some faculties. And these states of character are not very complicated things, but Aristotle will give a few, but two of them they are very familiar to us. We talk of a virtuous person who has a virtuous state of character, and a wicked person. But Aristotle talks about more. He talks about a superhuman excellence, which is a gift from the gods, and he talks about animal behavior of human beings. But then he talks about two in the middle, and I'm presenting them here with the Greek names, and I'm going to explain quickly what they are. And I'm going to start with Akrasia, this one here. And I'm going to start with it because I find very interesting what Aristotle says about Akrasia, because it's something very familiar to us. And he gives us an example. And the example is eating sweets, and this is his example. So eating sweets because they are pleasant to the taste, against a norm of reason not to do so. And Aristotle doesn't tell us what this norm of reason is, but we can imagine all sorts of things. A serious medical condition, someone who is diabetic, who really likes the chocolate cake or the donuts, but he knows or she knows that those things cannot be eaten because there are serious consequences, and yet the person eats them. Or it could be a religious norm. In Christianity, we're about to start Lent. Some people give up sweets for Lent. Well, I've given up sweets for Lent. I know that this is a path towards God, but then there is a chocolate cake and I cannot resist and I eat it. So I think we are very familiar with this. I suppose these days we will call it weakness of will. And there's many studies, many people talking about it at different levels. Now, let me tell you what is happening in Akrasia according to Aristotle. Aristotle says the person who has this state of character knows what is right. He knows that the person, that he or she should not eat that piece of cake because the consequences are not going to be good. But due to the passions, the feelings that he or she cannot control, that's what is wrong. So I've put here these two Greek words, the logos, the reasons, he has the right reasons. No, he shouldn't eat the cake, she shouldn't eat the cake. But the pathos, the affections, the feelings, the desires are opposed to that. And in the end, logos doesn't prevail, but pathos prevails. Now, there is another state of character, which is the opposite from this one, which is enkrateia. In enkrateia, the person feels the attraction and feels it strong, the attraction of that chocolate cake. And he or she, they know that they shouldn't eat it. And with a lot of effort, they manage to not to eat it. So logos and pathos are not aligned, but logos wins the day. Now, the state of virtues is very different, because for Aristotle, in virtues, you have an alignment of logos and pathos. I look at the chocolate cake, I know that I shouldn't eat it, and I'm happy. And I feel that happiness not eating it. So for Aristotle, virtue is feeling right. I shouldn't eat this, and I should be happy that I'm doing what is right. So in virtue, that alignment of pathos and logos happens. And then there is wickedness. In wickedness, for Aristotle, also logos and pathos, they meet. So what is the difference? The difference is that for virtue and krateia and akrasia, the logos is orthologos, is right reason. Orthologos in English is normally translated as right reason. My reason is right. I know what is right. While in wickedness, sorry, here animalities has cropped up, but this is not, I shouldn't be there. In wickedness, the pathos is not right. So I'm following something which is wrong, and it's going to lead me in the wrong way. There is an alignment of pathos and non-orthologos. Okay, so I've told you about states of character, and now this is the most difficult thing of this presentation. If I succeed here, the rest is plain sailing, and I hope it will open the way to a discussion. And I think I'm doing okay time-wise. Aristotle has a very important word in his Nicomachean Ethics, which, by the way, all the things I'm saying, they're mostly in his Nicomachean Ethics, also in his Eudemian Ethics, but you can find all of these in his Nicomachean Ethics. And there is a word there which is really important, I think, to understand many things of Aristotle, and a word that, unfortunately, it hasn't come into the vocabulary of at least Western philosophy. There are many words in Western philosophy that come from Aristotle: potency and act, matter and form. These things, they've come to us, and now they're part of our language. This word prohairesis, it didn't make it. And I didn't make it because it's quite a complex word. Now, it's normally translated as choice, but really, choice, it doesn't give us, when we think of choice now, this is not what Aristotle thought of prohairesis. The meaning is more precise and is richer. And Aristotle meant a few things. So prohairesis is a type of choice, but a choice that is very connected with deliberate desire. A desire that has been deliberate after a process of reasoning. But it's a desire that is being delivered after a process of reasoning that implies practical means, and not just a practical means for anything, but practical means connected with the end, the purpose of my life in view. So let me just say it again, and then I'll try to explain it in more detail. So prohairesis is a choice connected with a desire, deliberate desire that comes from reasoning. And it's a choice of practical means for a particular action in front of me, as or insofar as it connects to my purpose in life, which is living a good life. And as you can see, this is a very rich word. And maybe sometimes it's easier to understand what prohairesis is not. And I'm going to say this, not to add more things, but to clarify what I have just said. So Aristotle will say that prohairesis is not a random choice. You have this is a very, there's a paradox in philosophy. It's called buried donkey. A donkey which is in front of two stacks of hay, same size, same color, everything is the same. He's at the same, the donkey's at the same distance from the stacks of hay, and either chooses randomly or dies. So for Aristotle, prohairesis is not a random choice. It's not a random choice, but a deliberate choice. It's a process of deliberation. Someone asked me tea or coffee, and I just, without thinking, say tea. For that, Aristotle would not say that's prohairesis. So it's not a random choice. Second, it's not a deliberation of means for a technical task. There we have this little boy or girl who is placing some bits of this massive Lego because he or she wants to place them according to a set of instructions and thinks about how to do it. So it's also, the prohairesis is not about technical tasks. It's not the means to get a technical task done, but it connects with my end in life, with my purpose in life, and in the sense of purpose, my ultimate telos, he will say. But then he adds another thing which is quite interesting, that prohairesis is not about the impossible. Now, I can desire rationally that 2 + 2 is 5. And I can desire because maybe I wrote that in an exam. They asked me the question 2 + 2, and I put 5. And then I realized at the end of the exam, oh no, it was 4. So I can desire, but that desire is not going to elicit a prohairesis because I realize it's impossible. 2 + 2, there will never be 5, because now I've understood that there are 4. So for Aristotle, prohairesis is about something which is not impossible. Okay, so with these two tools, the states of character and prohairesis, now I want to go through the account of original sin as Aristotle will do, I think. And hopefully by the end of it, probably not too long, see if I can do it in under 10 minutes. So we have a lot of discussion time. So hopefully at the end, we will conclude that actually maybe original sin is psychologically possible. So, sorry, let me say something very quickly. Let me bring the states of character and prohairesis together, because this will help us, and I'll do this very quickly. Aristotle will say that in virtue, the person acts on prohairesis. In enkrateia, the person acts on prohairesis. He follows a prohairesis. In akrasia, the person acts against a prohairesis. It eats the chocolate cake, knowing that it's not good for his life. In wickedness, the person acts on prohairesis, but he has twisted the end of his life. For example, he thinks that pleasure is what is going to make him happy and make her happy. And that has become a prohairesis. So now let's go through the account of Genesis in an Aristoteliarchy. And I think you know the story of Genesis very well, and that's what I'm going to do first very quickly. The devil suggests to Eve that God's commandment of not eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it represses a potential growth, and that in that forbidden tree, they will find liberation from their state of being mere creatures. The devil promises that eating from the tree will make them like God, knowing good and evil. And that means, it's in the Christian tradition, that's been understood as creators of the laws of the natural world and of morality. That's what being like God means. Eve is seduced by the prospect, looks at the tree with new eyes, and we hear the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. Now before, when she looked at the tree, there was no desire contrary to God's commandments. But after the conversation with the devil, she looked at the fruit of the tree with desire. And that desire comes from the spiritual good that she saw in it. And with this new desire, she turns to action. And in disobedience with God, approached the tree. And then we read, took of its fruit, ate, and she also gave some to her husband, and he ate it. Now, what is the nature of temptation, of the temptation here? Because I think it's very important to understand this. The devil does not try to tempt Eve to eat the tree by focusing her attention on the looks of the tree and the pleasure of the taste. Now remember, they are in a state of virtue, logos and pathos are aligned, and that unity cannot be broken just by showing them how good the apple is. Look how good the apple is. It looks so good as a pleasurable desire. You can't break that in that way. But there is another option. If Adam and Eve, because they are virtuous, cannot act against their prohairesis, the purpose of their life, what they know is going to bring them happiness, what about changing their ideas of what a happy life is, so that they act with a mistaken prohairesis? And knowing the constitution of human beings, the devil attempts this avenue and presents a possibility up to now unthinkable to Adam and Eve. What if there is a higher God, a higher good than union with God, union with his will? And what if that good is potentially achievable? Now, we could say that in theory, and according to human logic, there is indeed a higher good than that of union with God, and that is to become God themselves. Now, this thought that I can become God is probably within the possibilities of human reason, so it could be rationally desired. However, an upright intellect as that of Adam and Eve will immediately see that this is impossible. And we said that prohairesis does not come from something impossible. The 2 + 2 = 5. So maybe they thought, to be like God is better to be in union with him, but that is impossible. So there is no possibility of that leading to action. So the devil then goes deep and argues that while becoming like God may seem impossible to the human reason, and I underline this, perhaps there is a way for that to happen that cannot be known naturally by the human reason, but that only God knows about. He's saying there is something else that you cannot understand, but God, who is God and above you, understands. And he says, the devil says, for God knows that when you eat of it, the fruit of the tree, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So the devil has shifted the situation from the realm of reason as they naturally see it to the realm of trust. And really that is the nature of temptation. It's moving from reason to trust. There is something that God knows that you don't know. And if you knew it, you will eat it from the tree. Now, with that in mind, and keeping in mind that it is a good thing to be God and better than to be united with God, Adam and Eve, with that new prohairesis, because now they see it can be realized, and then they eat from the tree. Now, I was going to explain this in more depth, but I hope it's understandable enough so that we can then move to the discussion. But let me just put it all together before we do that. And what I wanted to say here is, I hope I have shown, and as I say, quite quickly and purposely quickly, that the concept of states of character and how they work and the concept of prohairesis, it allows us to understand how sin was possible. It allows us to understand the psychological nature of the temptation. But I hope it's also clear that a tempter is needed, who points out a possibility that they couldn't have come up themselves. And I'm going to leave this like that, but I just want to finish with a little quote that I find really fascinating. It's a quote by Pope Benedict, one of his audiences on original sin. This time I will read it. Evil comes from a freedom created and from a freedom abused. How was it possible? How did it happen? This remains obscure. Evil is not logical. Only God and good are logical, are light. And then I just wanted to put this slide here and just giving you maybe a minute to read through it, because I think these are a collection of things that perhaps we can discuss. I think discuss some of these maybe with Syed when we spoke, and I'll be very happy to now start a dialogue. I'm happy that we still have more or less half an hour, which was my aim. So I'll just give you a few more moments to read through them. And maybe now I stop sharing. Is that okay? And thank you very much for your attention. I hope you could follow that. And yes, I'm looking forward for the discussion.
Great. Thank you so much. Fascinating. It was as fascinating to read it as to listen to you deliver the remarks again. So thank you so much. And certainly, as everyone digests what you have shared and your perspective on the concept of original sin and how to kind of think through it, perhaps I can, in the meantime, offer a question that I have, and that maybe we can start from there. So it is my understanding, and you spoke about it and you wrote about it, the notion of an original integrity that exists among Adam and Eve. And so if there is this original integrity, which is a divine gift from God, what prevents Eve, or Adam ultimately as well, from understanding the shift that the devil does in terms of shifting to trust? Like, why isn't there their harmony in what they have right now, in their pathos and their logos? Why isn't that able to discern that the devil is shifting this premises to trust and inviting them to trust him rather than to enact on what has been their will in line with God?
Yes, I think at that point you're touching on really freedom, and I think this is a really fascinating point, because when we think of freedom now in the modern times, we think of freedom as choice, or freedom as absence of obstacles, a freedom from obstacles that stop me from doing what I want. But really, I think freedom is something much more profound. And Isaiah Berlin will say that there is a freedom from, obviously, if I am constrained, there's so many things I cannot do, but there is a freedom to. And in a way, we are free when we can orient our whole life in a direction. And that freedom was there in Adam and Eve. And that freedom is there so that I can possess myself and can direct my whole life in a direction, and I can give myself. So that freedom comes with the possibility of love, with a relationship that God wants, a free relationship. So shifting that ultimate end in life is a possibility for those human beings. Otherwise, they could not have a freedom that leads to love. So if we think of human beings as created in the image of likeness of a God that is love and calls us to love, there must be a possibility for rejecting the union with him and following something higher. That possibility is there. How it gets activated, I mean, we can discuss, but I think you're touching on the point of freedom, which I think is very important. And I think in some ways what I'm saying here is very countercultural, because we see freedom as choice. I think this is a very mistaken way of seeing freedom.
Yes, I agree. Neuroscience demonstrates that while we may think we have full freedom, we in fact do not. And probably a reason why neuroscientists aren't allowed to give testimony in criminal defense trials here in the US oftentimes. But anyways, thank you for that. That's helpful. I have a follow-up question, but I know there's at least two hands up here. The comment about what the Greek is, hamartano, if I'm saying it right, the missing the mark. It's fascinating because in the Quran, with the story of this primordial theater that takes place, God says to Adam and Eve that, eat from whatever you want, but don't go near this tree. Otherwise, you will be wrongdoers. Okay. And then the Arabic is dhalimun, which comes from the Arabic verb, which means from dhalama. And dhalama in Arabic means to be tyrannical. But in pre-Islamic Arabia, dalama meant to put something in its wrongful place. In other words, miss the mark.
Very interesting.
Which I really didn't, or in this case, to miss the mark purposefully. And so that is what at least the Quran is saying will happen to Adam and Eve were they to eat from this tree. So that's it's just opened up a whole new way of thinking about this. So thank you for this conversation. We're running out of time. I did, if there aren't other questions, I did want to pose one more to you, Father Dancho, which is this: the way that I read your thesis and what you're arguing for, it seems to me that the original sin that occurred in this primordial time period, it appears to me that it may have been focused on Adam and Eve, and because they are the ones who made this calculus about trusting the devil and possibly in trying to be like God-like, and that may be a better mode or better way of existence. If that is the case, it seems to me that you're, in your article in section 10, you write that original sin, its consequence cannot be properly considered in isolation from the doctrine of redemption by Christ. And understanding what redemption by Christ may mean, in my understanding of it, it appears to me you in fact are demonstrating a way in which it is possible. Because, Duns Scotus, as you know, has talked about what the relationship between original sin could mean for the incarnation, and he tries to separate it out. Here, it appears that, is there space now in your own work? Do you see that may not necessarily be this necessary link if we think about the calculus is just based on Adam and Eve and not necessarily imputed to humanity that ensues?
Yes, this is a really interesting theological point, and in fact, it's just by chance. I was speaking with an imam about this very same thing last week on Thursday, and it's very interesting. And I think when I spoke with you as well, that the main difference between the Christian view of original sin and the Muslim view is that Adam and Eve, they're forgiven, and that forgiveness is part of the show of God's mercy. And in Christianity, God also forgives, but somehow the whole of the Bible is how God forgives, and that reaches the point of Christ. And it's as if we need to understand the whole of the Bible. The whole of the Bible is a tool to understand what happened there. And why we have to trust God. We have to trust God because the life that he wants to give us is so important, and he's so trustworthy. He's prepared to give his only begotten son so that he dies, so we understand that he's really trustworthy. So we can recover the trust. So this will be the narrative, the Christian narrative, that trust is propagated after original sin. Once the trust is broken, once the possibility is broken, it propagates, and that missing the mark leads to all sorts of disasters. And that recovery of the trust connects with that death of Christ. That, of course, for us Christians, is the Son of God. God shows us in the life of his Son that he's trustworthy. So a new chapter starts. So that's how I suppose we will see it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you for that. It's a more nuanced way of looking at that relationship than I think even comes off the pages in what you state in this particular sentence.
Yes, I didn't want to go too much into the theology.
Yeah, but it's great. It's a really. I read it and I said, oh, wait a minute. I think Father Dancho may be pushing the envelope here in a way that's really quite fascinating and really insightful, and really enjoyed reading it. So thank you so much for that. I know we only have a couple minutes left, so thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And I'll turn it over to Yashua for closing remarks.
Thank you.